Hey, so I'm back with another video on my eternal quest for the perfect webcam, and I think we're getting pretty close with this one. Let's ramble.
Hold up, things go wild when I pull up. They all on me like they want some.
Hey, what's up guys? It's great to see you all again, and if you're new here, I'm Patrick, and this is where I ramble about tech and other stuff. So yeah, ever since the pandemic hit, we've all had to accept that having the majority of our meetings online has become the new normal. Personally, I'm not salty about this at all. You wouldn't believe how many times I've had to travel to another country for some board meeting just to come back home thinking that meeting could have been an email. It's a waste of time, it's bad for the environment, so I say a giant hooray for meetings online. With that said, you probably all remember how hard it was to buy a decent webcam back in 2020, when everybody realized at the same time that they actually needed to improve their video conferencing setup. People were either using the potato cameras built into their computers, or at best something like the Logitech C920, and don't even get me started on the quality of the microphones. Fast forward to 2023, almost 2024, and I'm glad to say that a handful of manufacturers have been leading the pack in developing webcams that make online meetings a whole lot smoother, dare I even say a lot more fun. Now if you've been to the channel before, you've probably seen me test a couple of what I consider some of the best webcams around, and I kind of got hooked on looking for the perfect webcam. So I was pretty stoked when OBSBOT sent me their Tiny2 webcam, which is their new and improved successor to the Tiny 4K. I'd heard good stuff about it, seen it on a few other channels, and I've seen it compared more than once to the Insta360 Link, which has been one of my favorites so far. So I was very eager to review the OBSBOT Tiny2. I used it for a little while now, and I have some thoughts on it. So let's have a quick look at what's in the box, and then I'll show you some of the key features as well as some cool party tricks, and maybe we'll even throw in a little comparison to the Insta360 Link. Right, so the Tiny2 comes in a tiny box, very appropriate. Inside the box, we find some documentation, which hopefully we won't need to read. I always find that a truly great tech product shouldn't need a manual. Now what's underneath the manual makes me very happy because the OBSBOT comes with its own carrying case. I realize it might sound a bit weird to get excited about a case, but for some inexplicable reason, the majority of these webcams do not come with a case. And that sucks because I do travel quite a bit, and the last thing I want to do is toss a webcam, especially one with moving axes, into my bag without a case. So kudos to OBSBOT for providing that. Inside the carrying case, there's this little clip to mount the webcam to an external monitor or a MacBook screen, more on that later. Next, we have a USB-C to USB-C cable, which looks both sturdy and long, so it won't be pulling on the webcam. And of course, we have the Tiny2 itself, and as you can see, it has a flexible pan and tilt. And lastly, there's a little USB-C to USB-A adapter in case you don't have a USB-C port available on your computer. OBSBOT also sent me this remote, which is one of the things that makes it stand out. Most cameras have on-screen controls only, some have gesture controls, but no remote. The OBSBOT has all three, and I'll explain later why I actually prefer using a remote sometimes. I'm a little bummed that it doesn't have an internal rechargeable battery, but I guess it's a way to keep costs down. And the little QR codes on the box will help you find some of the software and manuals needed to operate the camera. So let me just remove the Insta360 from my main desk setup and replace it with the OBSBOT. What's cool about the little clip that goes on the screen is that it's magnetic. So I like to clip that onto the screen first and then just snap on the camera while it's on there. By the way, there's also a 1/4-20 screw hole on the bottom of the camera, so you can mount it to something like a tripod or a clamp as well. Now I could swap out the cable with the one that comes with the Tiny2, but I guess that's one of the perks of USB-C. I'll just use the cable that's already hooked up to my computer and it'll work just fine. You can see the lights flashing blue, and when it turns green, you know it's connected. Now technically, my MacBook Pro should already discover this as a webcam. Let's start up a quick Zoom call, and yep, I can already see the camera turning on. And there we are. Now obviously, since I haven't installed the app yet, I won't be able to take advantage of any of the features, but at least it's there right away. Once you download the app though, the Tiny2 can be used in all of its glory. One of the things I like about these gimbal cameras is that they can go to sleep. The app will say the device is sleeping, and what that means is that the camera is pointed down and the microphones are off. That way you know that nobody's watching you or can hear you. You can actually choose to leave the mics on in sleep mode in case you wanted to use this as a standalone microphone. But I'll keep mine off since I have a dedicated setup for my audio. Press resume to wake the Tiny2 back up and hit the power button on the app to turn it back off again. The video preview is really useful. You can see exactly what image you get, and as you can see, the options range from 720p at 30 frames per second all the way to full 4K resolution at 30 frames a second. Which one is the right format to choose will depend on your connection and the app you're using the camera with. Most video conferencing apps, for instance, will cap at 1080p max, but it's nice to have the 4K available, especially if you use it to record yourself. Now, as you can see, the framing is a bit awkward for me. There's too much headroom, and that is because I like to raise my monitor quite high to improve my posture. But that's where the AI tracking capabilities of the Tiny 2 come in, which I found to be really excellent. You can choose between standard tracking and motion tracking. Motion is cool if you have to move around a lot and you need the camera to follow quick. But if you're seated and you just need to track yourself a little, standard makes for a more relaxed tracking experience, which is also easier on the eyes for the person or people on the other side. You can even tell it where to focus, either on your head, your upper body. You can do close-up, which I like very much. So even when you move backwards, it will keep zooming in on you, so your entire space doesn't get exposed. There's also headless, which seems to focus on the chest area, in case you're showing off jewelry or, some other stuff. And then there's lower body, which I'm sure can come in handy on certain websites. I gotta say, the tracking on this thing really stands out. Tracking on the Insta360 Link is good, but whenever I move very fast or I walk out of the frame, and that happens, I'm in the office alone and sometimes I'll have to answer the door, the Insta will lose me in those cases. Not only does the OBSBOT hang on to me longer, it also picks me back up better when I walk back into the frame. Now, below the tracking zones, there's the AI mode tracking features like hand tracking, and I'm genuinely impressed with how well it follows my hand. Great if you're showcasing a product. The desk mode is a bit tricky because I'm using an external monitor, but if I tilt the camera just a little bit, it'll look perfect. And in contrast to other cameras, including the Insta360, the desk mode on this one does not look warped at all. There's also group mode, whereby it tracks more than one person. Sadly, I have no friends, so I can't show you that right now. And whiteboard mode, whereby it zooms in and fixates on a whiteboard, which is nice for presentations. No matter what mode you're in, you can always fine-tune the camera position if you wish by using the on-screen gimbal, as well as zooming in and out manually. Now, the Tiny 2 does offer gesture control, but just like I didn't use it on the Insta360, I don't see myself using it on the OBSBOT. I do like the ability to turn tracking on and off by simply raising my hand, but I'm not gonna go make finger gestures to zoom in and out during actual calls. And that is where the remote becomes a real added value to me. I don't always sit at my computer screen. When I'm on calls with clients, I might have to present something, or I might sit at a table removed from the computer. It really is nice to be able to operate the key features using the remote. It lets me track, zoom, close up. I can use the gimbal to fine-tune the camera position. It even lets me set preset angles and switch between them. And that's a really cool feature when you and one or more colleagues are in the same room and you want to switch between speakers really quick. There's also an entire section with beauty features, but that's definitely not my jam. I hear that these features are super popular in Asia, but I don't see myself using a filter on me. Although, if I'm being honest, my giant head could do with some slimming. What I will use is the background blur. I love that I can adjust the blur, and unless you really overdo it, it looks quite natural. Much better than the blur options within conferencing apps. Now, for my fellow camera nerds out there, we get to tinker with the image to our heart's content. You can set almost everything to manual, exposure, white balance, contrast, saturation, you name it. And ultimately, the image is what it's all about, right? A camera full of features and gimmicks would be useless to me, but the Tiny 2 actually delivers in the image department big time. I didn't think I would prefer the image over the Insta360, but I actually think both color and sharpness are better on the OBSBOT. Where the OBSBOT really shines though is in low light situations. A big part of the reason why it performs so well and looks so crisp is the fact that the Tiny 2 has a 1/1.5 CMOS sensor, which is quite large for a webcam, and it has dual native ISO, which helps to keep that image looking clean and crisp, even in dimly lit rooms. Guys, I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. If you want to pick one up for yourself, there's links in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please give it one of these. It really does go a long way. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.